Okay, you know what time it is. Neil Ratner here with a story. Today would have been my old friend Greg Lake's 72nd birthday. Now, as most of you know, I was the tour manager for Emerson, Lake and Palmer, and I got to know Greg, I guess we met about the early part of 1972. And after I was tour manager for Emerson, Lake and Palmer, I had a production company, and I did a big tour for them, and Greg and I got to be quite friendly. And today, I thought that I would tell you a few things about Greg and relate a few personal stories of mine that you might not know. So let me tell you, 2 years ago, on this day in 2017, I was in London. I was invited there by Greg's good friend and former ELP manager, Stuart Young, and Greg's wife, Regina. And the reason was they decided to hold a tribute for Greg on his birthday. It was about a year after he died. Greg died of pancreatic cancer in 2017. And on November 10th, 2017, Stuart and Regina invited all kinds of people in a beautiful little church in England. And it was, here you can see the program. I hope it's not a celebration. Yeah, okay. And various people were asked to speak, each one representing a different time in Greg's life. Let me show you the inside of the program. I don't know if you can see that, but that was the list of the speakers, and then there were some nice pictures. And on the back was the lyrics to I Believe in Father Christmas, one of Greg's great songs. So at any rate, in case you couldn't read it, the speakers were Stuart, who was Greg's manager and friend, followed by me, followed by Andrew Lane, who took over as tour manager when I left, followed by the one surviving member of Emerson, Lake and Palmer, Carl Palmer, followed by Bruce Pilato, a guy in the business end, Carl's manager, a friend of Greg's, then Bob Kinkle, and then Richard Desmond. At any rate, it was a magnificent affair, and it was wonderful, and I was so honored that I was asked to speak. And so today, for my story today, I'm going to read to you what I said on that event. And then maybe later, I have some pictures of the event. I'll scan some in, and I'll post some pictures at some point in the next day or two. All right, so... All right. I had only met Greg, Carl, and Keith less than a year before the tour when I was hired. And although I became friendly with all three, Greg and I developed a particularly close bond. He was very personable and friendly, and Greg radiated a certain warmth, and it was as if I had known him forever. And when I agreed to take the job, Greg immediately offered me a room in his muse house until I could find my own place. So I did. Moved to London, and I moved in with Greg. Okay. We had shared stories about our childhoods, and I knew that although Greg grew up very poor, he was surrounded by loving parents who made sure he lived in a supportive, happy environment. And I could see that it was important to him that I felt at home in his house. All right, so Greg was living with a girlfriend and these two beautiful Irish setters named Oliver and Cromwell. And I must admit, I did feel right at home, and you can't imagine how much I appreciated the fact that I didn't have to stay in a hotel. And things were great for a couple of weeks. And then unexpectedly, I got really sick. So sick, in fact, that I was bedridden and in terrible pain. Greg was amazing. He took over and not only got me the best doctor's money could buy, but made sure when I needed to be, I was admitted to the prestigious Harley Street Clinic, where I actually had to undergo a minor surgical procedure. And not only that, but he insisted that I come back to his house to recuperate. And although we only knew each other a short time, I felt like he was the brother I never had. I didn't know how to properly thank him. And after I recovered, we spoke about it, and Greg looked at me and said, "Neil, the greatest gift on earth that you can give someone is the feeling that they are loved and someone cares about them. How about that, right? All right, a couple of years later, I had started an all-in-one production company, and ELP became one of my first clients. Now, Greg and I talked extensively about the production for their next tour, and he came up with the idea that the band should travel with their own theater, self-contained theater. Now, in typical Greg Lake fashion, it was on the tour that dwarfed all other tours, and the theater, which we would construct and break down every night, when fully constructed on stage, was 60 feet long by 30 feet wide by 30 feet high, with a proscenium arch and full theatrical lighting. It was so big that we had to use the Shepperton Film Studios outside of London for the tour rehearsals. And let me tell you, it was a nightmare to travel with. I remember the first rehearsal. Greg showed up with a very elaborate $6,000 Persian carpet to put on his side of the stage. Now, we all know how Greg was, or maybe you don't know how Greg was, but let me tell you, Greg was a little bit over the top, to say the least. Carl and Keith freaked and really gave him a hard time, but Greg, he persisted, explaining that apart from making him feel more comfortable and more at home, the carpet made his spot on stage safer and better by covering the exposed wires. And Greg's concept of Persian carpets and large proscenium arches seemed incredibly far out. Don't forget, this is like 1972, 73. But now, if you go to big shows, you see it all the time. Now, when I was living at Greg's, we often talked about family. And Greg was especially interested in my sometimes turbulent relationship with my father. I had left college to work in the music business, and my father had pretty much disowned me. But he then saw the value in what I was doing, and he had become my not-so-silent partner in the production company that I started. Not only that, but he wanted to come on the ELP tour. Man, I was a little bit unsure about that, and I went to Greg for advice. And Greg not only convinced me to have him come on tour, but again, took over, booked him a fabulous room in the Dorchester Hotel, one of the best, if not the best in London, and planned for him to have a proper English dinner at the Muse House. Let me tell you, the evening was spectacular, and Greg and my dad talked all night. One of my favorite things about Greg was his ability to engage in conversations with all kinds of people and relate on their level. And he sure did with my father. By the end of the night, they were buddies, and Greg gave him the nickname of Coach. And my father did come on the tour for about 10 days. It was in Europe. And although the tour was something he never forgot in years to come, he always asked about Greg, and when he would tell the story, he always started the story with the evening at Greg's and how special that was to him. All right, cool. All right, my last story is a music story. Why not, man? I'm the rock doc. Okay, I didn't grow up wanting to be a tour manager or producer. My real dream, as most of you know, was to be a drummer. So, on my first trip home from London after taking the job with ELP, my father gave me a demo tape he received from a business associate who was managing a singer-songwriter named Michael Baldwin. I wasn't really sure what to do with it, and I played it for Greg. Now, much to my surprise, Greg really liked Baldwin and wanted to produce his record. I also liked him, and I was really stoked that Greg agreed to do it. But what he said next totally blew me away. Neil, you'll play drums on the album. I couldn't believe it, man. Greg and I had talked extensively about music, and he was well aware of my desire to be a drummer, but he had never even heard me play. So, as you can imagine, in the end, it was much harder than I thought. I wasn't a working drummer, but I hung in there, and my drumming did make the cut on a number of tracks. Michael Baldwin, I think you could find it somewhere. At any rate, I had never seen Greg work in the studio. Of course, I was very familiar with his singing and playing, and we had spent many evenings sitting around with Greg, guitar in hand, smoking and drinking the night away as he strummed and sang. To me, he was a real crooner, something he didn't get to do much in ELP. He loved Sinatra and Tony Bennett, and I think in another life, he might have gone in that direction. But what really blew me away was Greg Lake, the producer. He was very much at home behind the board, and I couldn't believe the talent he brought in and the tasteful way he used each musician. One of the guys that I particularly remember was the unbelievable sax player, Mel Collins, man. Check him out if you don't know who he is, but it was great to do a session with these guys. I was so freaked, but yet I was so vibed by it. Okay. And although the album never did much of anything, for me, it was the fulfillment of a dream, and I'm forever grateful to Greg Lake for giving me that opportunity. Thank you, Greg. All right. I don't think Greg was a very religious man, but his spiritual roots ran deep. He took life by the balls and lived it to the fullest. To me, it's not the quantity of years you have, but the quality of life you put into each and every day. And Greg Lake lived a fulfilling and quality life. He once said to me, "Life is a circle with no beginning or ending. It simply continues to transform and evolve." And I'm sure Greg's spirit is doing just that. All right, so a little bit different today. I hope you enjoyed that. If you happen to be up here, you can hear more about Greg in my 3 o'clock report today, this week in Rock Soundtrack of Our Lives on WDSD Radio Woodstock, iHeartRadio. It's really a nice report about Greg. Ends with an incredible story. All right, podcasts. Come on, everybody. Come listen to the podcasts on the Woodstock Podcast Network. I posted one on Facebook. I'll be posting more on Facebook. And, I still have a book that a lot of you haven't bought. Buy the book and buy it from my website if you can. It's better for me. But if you can't, Amazon's okay. Audiobook, ebook, iBook, whatever. Help me out here. All right. That's it. I'm done. Holiday weekend here. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Hope everybody is good out there. Neil Ratner Rock Doc. As always, keep on rocking. Bye.